From the premises, it can also be shown that the first motive of the movement of the sky is something intellectual. For he who acts according to his own species does not intend a higher form with his own form. For every agent intends what is similar to himself. But the celestial body, according to what it does by its motion, aims at the ultimate form, which is the human intellect, which indeed is higher than all corporeal form, as is clear from the foregoing. Therefore the body of heaven does not act for generation according to its own species, as the principal agent, but according to the species of some higher intellectual agent, to which the heavenly body is like an instrument to the principal agent. But the heavens act according to their motions to generation. Therefore, the celestial body is moved by some intellectual substance. Still, everything that is moved must be moved by another, as has been proved above. Therefore, the body of heaven is moved by another. Either then, it is something else entirely separated from it, or it is united to it, so that a composite of heaven and moving is said to move itself, inasmuch as one part of it is moving and another is moved. But if it is so, but everything that moves itself is alive and animated, it follows that heaven is animated, but no other soul than the intellectual, for it is not nourishing, since there is no generation and corruption in it, nor sensitive, since it has no diversity of organs. It follows, therefore, that it is moved by the intellectual soul. But if it is moved by an external motor, it will either be corporeal or incorporeal. And if indeed it is corporeal, it moves nothing but motion. For no body moves but motion, as is evident from the foregoing. It will therefore be necessary that this also be moved by another. But since it is not possible to proceed ad infinitum in bodies, it will be necessary to arrive at the first incorporeal mover. Now that which is completely separated from the body must be intellectual, as is evident from the foregoing. Therefore the movement of the heavens, which is first corporeal, is from the intellectual substance. Again, heavy and light bodies are moved by the generative and remover, as is proved in 8 of the physicists. For it cannot be that in them form is moving, and matter is moved, for nothing moves but the body. But just as the bodies of the elements are simple, and there is no composition in them except matter and form, so also the heavenly bodies are simple. If therefore they are moved like the heavy and the light, it must be that they are moved by the generator by itself, and by the remover by preventing by accident. Now this is impossible, for those bodies are ingenerable, since they have no contrariety, and their movements cannot be hindered. It is necessary, therefore, that those bodies should be moved by the movers through apprehension, but not sensitive, as has been shown. Therefore intellectual. Further, if the principle of the motion of the heavens is nature alone, without any apprehension, it must be that the principle of the motion of the heavens is the form of the celestial body, just as in the elements. For although simple forms are not moving, they are nevertheless the principles of motions, for natural motions result from them, as do all other natural properties. But it cannot be that the celestial movement follows the form of the celestial body as an active principle. For thus form is the principle of local motion, inasmuch as a body, according to its form, owes a certain place to which it is moved by the force of its form tending to that place, which, because it generates, is said to be a mover. Just as fire, according to its form, is entitled to be above. But to the heavenly body, according to its form, one place is no more suitable than another. Therefore, nature alone is not the source of celestial motion. Still, nature always tends to one thing, whence things which are by nature are always in the same way, unless hindered, which is in the minority. Therefore, what has a deformity from its own reason, it is impossible that it should be the end towards which nature tends. But motion according to its nature is of this kind, for what is moved, as such, is different now and before. It is therefore impossible for nature to intend motion for its own sake. Therefore he intends rest by motion, which is related to motion as one is to many, for it rests because it is similar now and before. If therefore the movement of the heavens is only by nature, it would be ordered to a certain rest, the opposite of which appears, since it is continuous. Therefore the movement of the heavens is not from nature as from an active principle, but rather from an intelligent substance. Again, for every motion which is from nature, as from an active principle, it is necessary that, if the approach to something is natural, that the withdrawal from it is unnatural and contrary to nature, just as a heavy body approaches downward naturally, but withdraws thence contrary to nature. If therefore the motion of the sky were natural, since it tends naturally to the west, contrary to nature, retreating from the west, it would return to the east. But this is impossible, for in celestial motion there is nothing violent and contrary to nature. It is therefore impossible that nature should be the active principle of celestial motion. Therefore, its active principle is some apprehensive force, and through the understanding, as is clear from what has been said. Therefore, the heavenly body is moved by the intellectual substance. However, it is not to be denied that the celestial movement is natural, for it is said that any movement is natural, not only because of an active principle, but also because of a passive one, as is evident in the generation of simple bodies. This, indeed, cannot be called the natural reason of an active principle, for it is naturally moved by an active principle within which the active principle is, for nature is the principle of movement in that in which it is. But the active principle in the generation of the simple body is external. Therefore, it is not natural by reason of the active principle, but only by reason of the passive principle, which is matter in which there is a natural appetite for natural form. Thus, therefore, the movement of the celestial body, as far as the active principle is concerned, is not natural, but rather voluntary and intellectual. But as far as the passive principle is concerned, it is natural. Now this is evident if we consider the relation of the celestial body to its place. For each thing is permitted and moved according to what it is in potential, but it acts and moves according to what it actually is. But the celestial body, considered according to its substance, is found to be indifferently in power to every place, just as the first matter is to every form, as has been said. But it is different with a heavy and a light body, which considered in its nature is not indifferent to every place, but by reason of its form, a place is determined for itself. Therefore, the nature of the heavy and light body is the active principle of its motion, but the nature of the celestial body is the passive principle of its motion. Hence, it must not appear to anyone that it is violently moved, just as heavy and light bodies are moved by us through the intellect. For heavy and light bodies have a natural aptitude for the opposite motion to that by which they are moved by us, and therefore they are moved by us by violence, something. But the celestial bodies have no aptitude for the opposite motion, but for that by which they are moved by intelligent substance. Hence, it is at the same time voluntary as far as the active principle is concerned, and natural as far as the passive principle is concerned, but to that by which they are moved by intelligent substance. Hence, it is at the same time voluntary as far as the active principle is concerned, and natural as far as the passive principle is concerned. but to that by which they are moved by intelligent substance. Hence it is at the same time voluntary, as far as the active principle is concerned, and natural, as far as the passive principle is concerned. But the fact that the movement of the heavens is voluntary according to the active principle is not inconsistent with the unity and conformity of the celestial movement, from the fact that the will relates to many things and is not determined to one. For as nature is determined to one by its virtue, so the will is determined to one by its wisdom, by which the will is directed infallibly to one end. It is also clear from the premises that in celestial motion there is neither approach to any place nor withdrawal from it against nature. For this happens in the motion of the heavy and the light for two reasons. Firstly, because the intention of nature is determined in the heavy and the light to one place, whence, as it naturally tends towards it, so contrary to nature, it recedes from it. Secondly, because two movements, one of which approaches the limit and the other recedes, are opposites. But if in the movement of the heavy and the light, not the last place is taken, but the middle, as it naturally approaches it, so it naturally recedes from it, because the whole stands under one intention of nature, and they are not opposite movements, but one and continuous. And so it is in the motion of the heavenly bodies, because the intention of nature is not towards something where it is determined. As has already been said, even the movement by which a body moved in a circular motion by some sign recedes is not contrary to the movement by which it approaches thither, but is one and continuous movement. Wherefore every place in the motion of heaven is like a mean, and not like an end in a straight motion. But it does not differ, so far as the present intention is concerned, whether the celestial body is moved by the intellectual substance united to it, which is its soul, or by the substance separated from it, and whether each one of the heavenly bodies is moved directly by God, or not at all, but by mediating created intellectual substances, or at first only directly from God, but others by mediating substances created, provided that it is considered that the celestial movement is from an intellectual substance.